Well, hello, Jeff Siegel.
Hi, Jen.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us at the Dating Advisory Board today.
My pleasure.
We are thrilled to have you. Just to give a little bit of background on Jeff. Jeff has spent close to 4 decades as a creative force in the communications industry, as the creative director and executive producer for hundreds of corporate meetings, product launches, and entertainment events. He has developed a reputation for not only excellence, but out-of-the-box thinking as well.
Wow.
Yeah. It's impressive.
I would date me.
Yes.
Jeez.
I mean, it's really, really good.
Hot.
Yeah. And then not to mention, you're also the author of Relation Trips,
Right.
a simpler, powerful way to bond with your loved ones through personal road trips. I cannot wait to talk about this. The definitive guide to customized family travel.
Mm-hmm.
And right before the show, you were talking a little bit about when you actually went on the road with your son. So that was really cool. So we'll talk about that as well. And you're currently working on your next book, Dates and Nuts, a scathing and hilarious account of midlife dating in the 21st century. I can't wait for that one to come out. It should be good. So what did I miss? Tell us a little bit more background on you and how you got to this point in your career.
Oh, good gosh. Well, almost 4 decades on the corporate side, but now kind of segueing out and pursuing some of the cool, fun stuff like Dates and Nuts, which, as you shared, Jen, is the dates I've had in the last 15, 20 years of being divorced and the nuts that I've met in the process.
Yeah.
And Relation Trips is still alive and well, which is a cool, I think a little bit more of a PG kind of content and approach. And then I also have a small entertainment studio with a longtime friend and business partner who is the author of the Walking Dead novels.
Oh, wow.
And he and I formed a little studio called Magnetic Inc.
Okay.
And we're kind of marketing and merchandising his proprietary properties. Just released our first book earlier this year called Self-Storage. A really scary horror novel.
Oh, my God. I'm scared
about
already.
a 44-year-old heroin addict, lifetime heroin addict, who gets trapped in a self-storage locker 2 days before Christmas with his 6-year-old son with no food, no water, no heroin. All hell breaks loose. It's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like one of my dates.
That's one of your dates.
See what I did there?
I like that. I mean, you really segued that really good. Good. So we were talking before the show about how we can better communicate in the dating world. In this acronym that I put together based on your your list is CRAFT. Okay. So we're going to talk about clarifying.
You came up with that.
Okay.
That's great.
I know. I mean, I like stuff. I mean, it's my marketing background, right?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think this is really appropriate. And when we were talking about this, I thought, oh my gosh, this applies both so well in both the dating world and the business world. That it's very. So we're going to go down it. So I'm going to talk about what CRAFT is, and then I'll tell you each one, and we'll go through them. So number 1, clarifying objectives. Number 2, responsiveness. Number 3, appropriateness. 4, first impressions. And 5, texting. So let's talk about clarifying objectives.
Right. Well, I think much like when we're searching for a job or courting a new client, it's important to pretty much out of the gate be on somewhat mutual ground in terms of what you're looking for. When you meet somebody, as I did in the last year, who within a matter of minutes on the first date makes a comment along the lines of, geez, you are going to make a great father figure for my 8-year-old. Well, that kind of puts a damper on the proceeding. First date.
Wow.
First date. But that wasn't quite as bad as the woman who said to me on the first date, and these are all true stories. Your audience should know that. This is not the kind of creative stuff you can make up. As some of my friends say to me, Jeff, you couldn't make this shit up.
Right. What do they say? Fact is better than fiction.
Yeah.
Or You can't even...
It can't make this stuff up. She said to me, this was easily within the first half hour. She said, I'm really hoping to have another child. And I, at the time, was pushing 50 and looked at her and said, and so you shall. Just not with me. So I think it's important up front, and there is kind of some boundaries and parameters. I know we're going to talk about what's appropriate, but those kind of bombs shouldn't necessarily be dropped within the first 15 or 20 minutes.
Right. Now, would you say that she was clarifying, like if you say, what are you looking for? Because I mean, I've had that been asked, like, so what are you looking for? I mean, they're trying to get right off the bat, what's your story? It's like they want to know everything up front within that first few minutes.
Right, especially as you get into your 40s and 50s. I know you've got a ways to get there, Jen.
Nice.
But you don't want to necessarily spend a whole lot of time, but it's a squirrely road to maneuver in terms of what you say and what you don't say. Because we all, as we get older, and I've been out there now post-marriage, like 15, 16, 17 years, we all bring a lot of baggage, there's that word, to the party. And so there's a couple of things I like to say about that. For it to work, you kind of both have to have baggage from the same manufacturer. So if you both have like American Tourister or Toomey or Samsonite, then you got a shot. So you kind of want to get a feel for each other's baggage without like opening up the entire suitcase.
Right.
Although down the road, I like to say in order for things to work, you have to be willing to help each other unpack. So you kind of want to get a sense for the manufacturer of their baggage early on, but you don't want to like pop open the suitcase and have clothes flying everywhere.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't be a great idea. And
it'd be hot though.
And messy.
Yeah, messy.
And messy. Okay, so number 2, responsiveness.
Right. I think as in any interpersonal kind of dynamic, there needs to be some respect paid to when and how quickly you respond. Now, men and women were all brought up with this notion that you got to wait 3 days before you call, 5 days before the second date. There's so many freaking algorithms that it gets to. At the end of the day, you have to show some interest and some responsiveness up front. Recently, should I tell you about the organic
Yes, let's
gardener
talk about
that
the gardener.
we were
Let's talk about her.
Earlier kind of mentioning. So a particular dating site that I was on requires, and we won't name names, going through kind of several stages of back and forth until you can actually begin to communicate directly via email.
Okay.
And this particular woman was kind of quirky and interesting, and I was taken by the fact that she listed her occupation as storyteller. I mean, how often do you...
That's awesome.
I know, storyteller. For someone like me, that was like, catnip. That's kind of cool. So we go back and forth, and this takes the better part of a week. And she also had mentioned that she was an organic gardener, which I figured that was material right there. I needed more information.
Yeah.
So we went back and forth for the better part of a week, and then eventually we were able to email. And I sent her a note and said, so why don't we grab a cup of coffee? And by the way, coffee's always preferable to alcohol on a first date because alcohol changes the dynamic completely, but we could do an entire show on that.
Yeah.
And she wrote me back and she said, well, actually, I said, why don't we meet for coffee? How about we hop on the phone and we can figure out when and where? And she wrote me back. She said, actually, I don't like to do phone calls. I kind of like to set something up so it's kind of like we're meeting as strangers and there's really been no previous contact. All right, a little odd, but quirky woman. She's a storyteller.
Right.
So I wrote her back and I said, all right, just name when and where. And she wrote me back in the next day and said, well, I'm going to be in the town just north of where you live in 3.5 weeks. I'm performing at a storytelling festival. Why don't you show up and just kind of approach me as if you don't know me, and we'll kind of bump into each other. She used that phrase in her email a couple times. We'll bump into each other as if we don't know each other, and we'll go from there. Now, I don't know if this was some kind of kinky fantasy deal that she had, but 3 weeks from now, we're going to bump into each other, and we're going to act like we don't know each other. And fortunately, I was going to be out of town with you the weekend that she is probably speaking right now at the storytelling festival.
And you're not bumping into her.
I'm not bumping into her, and it never kind of panned out. So anyway, back to responsiveness. You need to kind of make things happen at a pace that's comfortable, yet reasonably kind of responsive in that let's get together, let's have a cup of coffee, because the longer it drags out and the more phone calls and the more texts, and by the way, texting is the cancer of dating. We could talk about that if you want. It is the cancer of dating and probably any other type of relationship. But the longer
Can't even stand it.
Yeah, the longer you drag that stuff out, Jen, with all, the less likely that you're eventually going to be able to, develop something of substance.
Yeah. No, it's true. You talk about, earlier responsiveness, and, people do want to talk on the phone. Let's talk about that for a second. I mean, we'll go more in the Texas, but, I don't know, out of my age group, we're used to the phone. We're not used to texting, right? We're not used to that. I mean, so if a guy is going to call you, because all I hear from my girlfriends is like, oh, it's just all text. They don't want to talk on the phone. Nobody wants to talk on the phone. What? And it goes the same in business. They don't want to pick up the phone. They just rather shoot an email or a text. And especially in the younger generation, they're like, the phone, I have to talk. I have to engage in a conversation. That's crazy to me.
Right. And what if you were pursuing, let's continue with that business parallel. If you were pursuing a really cool job that you were interested in, would you conduct the entire first interview with your potential employer via text? Would that really aid and abet your likelihood of landing the gig?
Right.
Probably not.
Probably not.
And texting is, I'll say it again, the cancer of dating, especially early on, because you can hide behind text. Not only that, there are so many ways to interpret any text. And I don't care how many emojis, bitmojis, momojis you use.
My bitmoji's on point, though. I'm just.
I got to see your bitmoji.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm sure it's
I'll send it to you.
good. Okay, all right. But it doesn't substitute for human interaction.
Yeah.
So the quicker you get off the text and onto a phone call, the better off you are.
Yeah. Now, when we talk, let's go on that. That's a good segue into impressions.
Right.
First impressions in the business side and then the personal side.
Right. You get one chance to make a first impression. I think you really got to think it through as to how you're going to present yourself. Recently, I was fixed up with a woman. We'll call her Mary because her name is
Maggie.
Oh, you weren't supposed to say
I thought you said
that.
it wasn't her real name. You said
It was neither of those
names. I was like,
names.
you got me on that. I'm in trouble.
Anyway, we'll call her Myrna for the moment.
Okay.
And Myrna and I were fixed up, and we texted a couple of times, and she was out with her friends. As a matter of fact, one of her friends was a friend of mine.
Okay.
And they were out partying, and my friend texted me and said, Myrna's perfect for you. I'm going to shoot you her number. And so I sent Myrna one of those fun little first texts. Hey, have fun tonight. If everything I've heard about you, Myrna, is true, I'm not going to be able to think for the rest of the evening. Well, I'll call you tomorrow. 5 o'clock Saturday, the next day, I called Myrna.
Okay.
Okay? I'm going to give you, Jen, a legit dramatization of how this call went. And this is not creative interpretation, exactly how it went. Phone rings. Do you want to do a ring? Ring, 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 ring. And Myrna answers the phone. Hello? Myrna? That's me. Myrna? Yeah. Hey, it's Jeff from last night. Oh, wait, I'm still hungover. Well,
why would she answer the phone?
We'll get there.
Okay.
First impressions, remember?
Right, exactly.
I can't talk now. I'll call you back. Okay, well, feel better. Now.
That's random.
If you really were hungover, and if you're 50 years old or thereabouts, which she was, and you're hungover at 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon.
Oh, I thought you were saying,
That's the next day, right? Yeah. Remember Friday night?
I thought, for some reason, I thought it was the morning, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, next day.
Okay.
5 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. But even crazier is, to your point, Jen, why answer the phone? Is that going to impress me and make me think, God, I got to start dating this woman yesterday? And the icing on the cake was 5-6 days passed and I never heard from her. And sent her a text and got some goofy response, and it dissipated and went away and went to the land of where all...
The vortex of nothingness.
Exactly. So first impressions. Yeah. Think it through. Now, that's an extreme example.
That's an extreme example. But you should be yourself. And that's the other thing you said, your best self. You should be yourself.
You should be yourself, but you should be cognizant of... You wouldn't go... I said this to you when we were talking the other day. You wouldn't go to a job interview or a first meeting with a client and start bitching about your previous employer or the last client who screwed you over because he or she didn't pay you on time. You wouldn't walk into the office and say, hey, I'm hoping to do business with you, and I hope you're not like that dick that screwed me out of $10,000. You got to kind of put yourself in the other person's position. Would you really want to hear somebody bitch about their ex? And believe me, that happens more than you would think in terms of hearing from a man or a woman. The genders are equally guilty about the a-hole who they just, dumped, or the marriage they had that ended a year ago that was a nightmare. You don't want to hear about that stuff.
Yeah, but it's interesting because people they will want to find out, what happened in your past relationship, or what happened. And then if they may not like the answer, then they've already kind of put this, preconception of who you are. But, I don't know why people would even ask it kind of on the first date anyway.
That should happen down the road, 2, 3, 4, 5 dates. The first couple of dates, I firmly believe. And look, I don't claim to be an expert on this. As a matter of fact, when my 23-year-old son found out that I was going to be joining you, he, being very astute a couple of days ago, looked at me and he said, Dad, do you really think you're the guy to be on a dating advisory show?
Yeah.
And I said, well, Spence, here's the deal. I've made so many mistakes, and I've learned some, and I've really started to fix, Jen, the error of my ways in many respects, that at the very least, I think others can benefit from not falling into the same mistakes and errors that I've made. And those first couple of dates should be talking about your family, your kids, your favorite TV shows, what kind of food you like, where you'd like to travel. There's a ton of stuff you can talk about that steers clear of the kind of really sensitive crap that you don't want to know early on. You just don't. You shouldn't.
Yeah. And I had one of my girlfriends, she's like, I went out with this guy and we were texting forever. And I don't know if he just thought it was just completely appropriate on the first date to kind of go into this. So what happened and what was, your reasoning and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, dude, just because I texted you for a few days, this is still the first date. Right?
Right. It doesn't take the place of getting to know one another face to face.
Right. Now, okay, so let's do texting. Let's get deeper into that. Like, what is, we talked about what is too much too soon, and then, if your phone's blowing up all the time, or like, what is the right amount? So let's have your thoughts on that.
I may morph into some really ugly monster if we talk about this too long. It's one of my huge pet peeves. I think texting, well, you've heard me say it a couple of times already, is the cancer of dating because you can hide behind it. It's so easy to misinterpret. I think it really should be used initially as a conduit, as a bridge to hopping on the phone. If you're texting more than a couple of times back and forth to figure out when you can speak, it generally is for one person, the other, or both going to deteriorate into some type of miscommunication or misinterpretation. Now, once you start dating somebody, I know a lot of people say, well, texting is how I best communicate. And I guess to each his own. I haven't had a whole lot of success with that. Maybe because I'm like way too communicative to a fault. But
you're a storyteller. Like you're like me. I mean, we like to hear people's stories. Like we like to be on the phone. I mean, that's just, I don't know if it's a generational thing or not. But the millennials, doesn't seem they're just all texting or bit emojis which is fine if that's the way they communicate with that. But you have to have the right whoever you're speaking with. They have to be on the same page if that's okay, or else it's going to create issues.
Yes, and you know why emoticons exist, which is, I guess, the technical name, because they're supposed to be a substitute for emotion, emoticon, emotion, but it's a really bad substitute because without the inflection of someone's voice and the ability to, hear whatever emotion they're expressing, the likelihood of, again, things being misinterpreted goes up exponentially.
Right. What's that really funny mime that goes through talking about, well, he said he was busy. I bet he's real busy, but he probably was busy. But you take it into this because just how you just can interpret it 20 different ways.
You're reading into it.
You're reading into it when it's just like just take for what it's worth, right? And if they're not texting you right after a couple days, bye Felicia. I mean, I'm serious.
Yes,
and it's not the 3-day rule. Like it makes no sense, especially unfortunately in this day with everybody on these apps, the dating apps, and we'll talk about how the difference between the dating apps and the dating sites. The dating apps just seem to be you're just swipe left, right, just so much access and not really a lot of personality of one-on-one getting to know someone's real story.
Correct. Yes, and I know you wanted to talk about that as well, but I think the button on the texting thing is, and I'm not suggesting this is the gospel and that I got it figured out, but what's worked best for me is once you've been dating somebody for, I don't know, several weeks, a month or two, I like to politely and respectfully ask that for the most part, texts be used for, I'm running 15 minutes late, can you pick up a bottle of wine on the way over? Have a great day. And once you start to get into anything that's too kind of meaty or requires, as you and I have been talking, some type of real communication, I mean, proceed at your own risk.
Right. I mean, because you can't have your whole relationship be text message.
No, although a lot of people rely on it, as we know, pretty extensively.
No, that's crazy. That's crazy. So talk about that. So if you're creating, and with your communication background, how do you create your own dating strategy? I mean, what's some us? What's some points you can
Well,
give to
apparently I haven't been doing too well.
No, stop. I like the craft. We're being crafty
We're being
today.
crafty.
We're being crafty on the dating advisory board.
Well, again, I think it varies based on where you're at in life and what you're looking for. And we go back to, as you said, as we were talking earlier, what your objectives are.
Right.
And within a reasonable amount of time up front, within the first several dates, kind of getting a feel for whether you and the other person have similar objectives. And one of the things I've learned in crafting my strategies as I've gotten older is the need to be flexible. I take a lot of you-know-what from some of my close friends, male and female, in terms of opening up my horizons. Just because somebody lives 25 miles away shouldn't necessarily exclude them from potential. I've been pretty, again, my friends and my son would use the word picky. I prefer to use particular. But I think strategies, Jen, are an evolving thing. And I think it's really important to take a look at where you're at, what you want, on a pretty regular basis. Because I know even in the last couple of years, since I got out of my last long-term relationship, what I want and what I'm willing to accept has evolved significantly. Some for the better, some for the worse. So one of the things I tell some of the folks, my single friends, male and female, is where you're at today isn't necessarily where you were at 2-3 months ago. And unless you want to continue to provide me with fodder for a lot of funny stories that I can weave into my shtick, maybe. Is it okay to use shtick? Is that cool?
That's fine.
Okay, then maybe you need to kind of reassess where you're at and what you're looking for.
Right. I think because, I always say you have to write down your core principles, your core values, and what you're looking for. But then I hear, friends, well, okay, so mine is 30. What? That's aggressive. I mean, where are you trying to find that negative percentile of people? Now are you setting yourself up for failure because you just don't want to put the effort in and see I didn't meet anybody because they weren't in my 100 different check off list.
It's a cliche, but cliches become cliches because they're grounded in truth. But you got to kiss a lot of frogs.
Right.
I mean, and the older you get, and I know a lot of your audience is younger, and the ground rules are a little bit different, but the older you get, as we said a few minutes ago, the more set in your ways you get, the more, okay, we won't use the word baggage again, we'll say experience. The more experience you bring to the party, so you gotta kind of kiss a lot of frogs.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well.
But they're not going to turn into Prince Charming, unfortunately.
Well, one of them will. It only takes one, right?
Right.
As I tell one of my buddies, there's a unicorn out there somewhere,
Oh,
right?
I just had that conversation with someone else.
Was it Gary Schumann?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it wasn't. No.
All right.
It was one of my buddies, and they said unicorns don't exist. I was like, wow, you haven't met my friends. We freaking are goddamn unicorns flying in our glory.
Well, they're out there somewhere. It only takes one.
Right, I know.
As many of my female friends have told me time and time again, shout out to Debbie Ford, who's the major proponent of this notion, it only takes one.
Right. It's true.
There you go.
I know. I like it. So
much for the positive outlook.
Yeah.
Now let's start bemoaning our fates again.
Exactly. I know. Okay. So that goes into thoughts on the 21st dating now, the 21st century dating. Now, we talked a little bit about how the game has changed, right? So let's talk a little bit about, there's such a plethora of dating sites and dating apps. It could be overwhelming with so many things to choose from. How would you manage that? How do you? Are you on multiple, or how are you just kind of honing on one specific subject matter expert and knowing this one system inside and out, or how are you?
Multiple is always better, right?
Right. Well, yeah, it is.
That was
I know.
innuendo.
Yeah, I got it.
You're just gonna let it go.
Yeah, I'm just gonna let that
Can't
go.
get you to bite. All right. Look, the difference between back in the day, the way we used to meet people before there were dating sites and subsequently dating apps is literally night and day. And I've often thought of putting together some kind of seminar to teach the uninitiated. And not a month goes by that one of my friends at this age who's getting divorced isn't entering the online world of dating for the first time. And it can be a treacherous road if filled with landmines.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not kind of educated as to the ground rules and what to look out for. And I'm not just talking about the obvious stuff like people trolling who are, maniacs and looking to cut someone up into a million pieces.
I mean, there's that.
Yeah, there's that, which, is horrible. But right. the basic kind of goings on in terms of understanding how to read a profile, what to write in your profile, how to reach out to somebody, how to conduct the initial interaction. I mean, it has become, dare I say, God help me, an art.
Yeah.
In that if you're not kind of familiar with how it works and how to play the game, you're going to get blown away early on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very different.
Now, what would you say on these profiles that when you're looking at what kind of stands out to you? Is it more of the description or the pictures or multiple? What makes you swipe left or what makes you swipe right? I mean, I know if they're a storyteller, you're going to swipe right. But.
And yeah, right. And if they have an organic garden.
Yes, because they can make some mean kale soup or something.
It's nothing hotter than a good kale souffle.
Yeah, exactly.
You got me. You had me at kale.
You had me at kale.
Let's see. What was the question? What do I look for? Oh, yeah. Well, for me, and this is obviously personal preference, someone who writes really well and, knows how to string words together and make sentences and exhibits a really positive attitude. One of my buddies and I joke a lot about these women who put in their profiles, if you're a player, I'm not interested. Okay. No player's interested, which begs the question, Jen, please, maybe you can enlighten me because the Dating Advisory Board, I'm sure, has addressed this. Do women expect the players to acknowledge that and say, oh, I'm a player, I'm not going to pursue her?
No, they're going to be like, oh, watch this, click.
Right.
Okay, but then those women are the one who tend to go for the players. Right.
So someone who says, if you lie, cheat, steal, screw around, or if you're looking for a hookup, then, head on your way. As if that, guys who are...
Yeah, let me just sign up for that one.
Right, exactly.
Let me just push accept.
So negativity to me, and I kind of think across the board, most people would see negativity as a real turnoff, although it doesn't stop people. If you and I pulled up, Match.com right now and went randomly through 50 male and 50 female profiles, I guarantee you a solid 25% of them would have some kind of negative juju going.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we go through these profiles and it's insane. I mean, there's one guy, I will not name the app. So you talk about profiles, so from the girl's perspective, I'm weird. I have that, communications marketing background. So when you have pictures, I think that just like in business, they should be professional and be you and be updated and show your different sides of your personality, right? So if you're really into tennis or you're really into biking or, running or, just show you having fun. And how many times I've seen people not smiling, not doing anything. I mean, that's just crazy to me, and it's make it unique. I mean, make it somewhere where we want to see, they look like they're having fun.
Right.
Right.
And you're selling yourself early on. You're putting optimally your best foot forward so that someone sees you as kind of a interesting proposition.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So talk a little bit about, I think we have one more dating story because we have a few minutes, but I want to talk about some of the stand-up comedy that you're starting to do again and how that will relate to dates and nuts.
Sure. Well, a couple of years ago, I did, for the better part of a year, some stand-up in the Chicagoland area where I'm from, built around the Dates and Nuts brand. And I've started to rework that, rebuild it, working with a phenomenal comedy coach, one of the best in the country out of L.A., Jamie Campbell. JamieCampbellComedy.com is his site if you want to read some outrageously funny stuff on life and dating and all that cool stuff. But Jamie's working with me, and I'm putting together kind of a new set that I'm going to start working through the Chicagoland kind of comedy scene in 2017, because there's so much fun stuff, and I always hear and get from my friends so many great stories that it kind of infuses a lot of the stuff that I've already experienced. And as you know, having seen various chapters from the book, there's some wacky, funny, crazy stuff.
Oh, I know. We cannot talk about all
of it we can't.
Cannot talk about, but
we can talk about one of them.
Yeah.
We can talk about Bob's roommate.
Okay, go.
Real quick, and then maybe we'll throw an offer out there for your audience to read the whole Bob's roommate story. First date with a woman who we'll call Diane because her name is
Bitsy?
No, it's Diane. That's the not real name. That's the alias. So anyway,
I know, I'm just messing with you. I just came up with something creative. I'm like,
we
Bitsy.
could do that banter. That could be
exactly.
our thing.
That could be it.
See?
No, that's right.
Anyway, Diane invited me back for an after-dinner drink, and as we got to her place, which was a 3-flat, she shared with me that she just wanted me to know that she had a male roommate named Bob, but it was very platonic.
Okay.
And he lived on the bottom floor. She had the top floor. Middle floor was community property. I'm not sure if he's home, Jeff. We walk in, and you hear this loud bellow, "Hello!" Well, Bob was home. And what ensued, Jen, was kind of the dating equivalent of a Clockwork Orange. Bob played apparently in a band. As he very quickly explained to me, he played tuba. And, oh yeah, Bob was a big guy, and he was wearing the remnants of a tuxedo that clearly he had on that night. And she.
What do you mean remnants? Was it just the shirt?
The shirt and the pants, but there was no
he had
tie.
pants on.
Yeah, he had pants on.
Okay, just
Bob
checking.
was big. He was a big dude. And for some reason, Diane was kind of buzzed a little bit. She'd had more than she should have had on a first date, wine, and she said to Bob, "Do you want to join us for a drink?" And inexplicably, he said yes, and we sat down. And what happened from there, between Diane propositioning me in my ear and Bob sharing stories of the celebrities he'd met when he found out what I did for a living on the corporate side, intermingled with loud. Bob had gas. He had gas. So he would, fart uncontrollably over the course of the next half hour. It was surreal. And it's a very funny story.
He just ignored it like it doesn't happen. He's like, oh, sorry.
I made some kind of offhanded comments. But anyway, the story's called Bob's Roommate. And if you want, if anyone who sends me at the email address we're going to share, their dating story, their crazy, funny, wacky dating story, I will email them back the Bob's Roommate chapter from the upcoming book.
So let's talk about other things that are coming up with you, and how do people get in touch with you?
Well, people can get in touch with me through my email address, Jeff@JeffSiegelCreative.com. I know you're going to put that up on the screen. And what I'm working on now is Dates and Nuts, the book, and the stand-up for 2017,
awesome.
and working on the magnetic ink stuff with my Walking Dead buddy, and working on relation trips, and working on finding the perfect woman, because I know she's out there somewhere, right?
Your unicorn is out there.
Maybe they can email me about that. If you read my profile, maybe we'll put my profile up.
There you go. I love it. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for joining the Dating Advisory Board today.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate it, and can't wait to see what comes next.
Thanks so much.
All right.
It's been a blast.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.